be. I'm your humble host, Mr. David Null, also known as Hawkeye Two Feathers, and I greet you with the love and the honor of the infinite creator. And I continue to pray that each and every day, that each and every one of you will continue to learn how to accept and receive the knowledge, the healing, the wisdom, and the many blessings from the creator. So with that said, this has been bothering me ever since I seen it on the interview, and I'm sitting here looking on my television set, and there's another reaction video of, you know, why did they react like this? And I would like to put my 10 cents out there. Having, well, Dave, what kind of experience do you have? And it's like, well, I'm 72 years old, and my experience is that I've been watching people for many, many, many years. Who's that came on there? I can't see. Well, good morning to you anyway. So how do I know these things? And it's like, well, I'm looking at a picture of Dan right now on somebody else's channel, right? And having been, in prison myself, having, been around a bunch of people, having been around a bunch of liars, and people who are, you know, deceiving, deception. And so many people saw the interview, and they were like, no, these guys, they ain't telling the truth. Now, I can't say about Cash Patel, but this particular the body language guy, he gives, looks at different features and how they act and react, so forth. But anyway, so the reason I feel like I can discuss Dan, having just been 72 years of observation of people. I've worked in as a director in theater for many years. Over 20 plays I directed. So watching people and their reactions and asking people to react certain ways also is like, I want you to convey this to the audience. And so I'm watching him and Cash both, and I'm like, what are they trying to convey to the audience? You know, what is the everybody, everybody that I've watched and responded, they all say, "But it's a lie. What they said is a lie." And it's like, but how do you know? It's a lie. But how do you know? It's because they can see it. They can see it in their reactions. What was your first reaction when you saw them say that about what to call it? I'm not going to say his name, you know, but we know what we're talking about, right? So, but he killed himself. That's it. Really? Yep, killed himself. Um, but wait a minute, hang up. Nope, killed himself. That's it. Now, having watched Dan over the years, Mr. Bongino, and having him say the things that people are digging up, from his previous podcasts and so forth. When you're a podcaster, it's one thing. You can say what you want. But when you become the deputy director of the FBI and you have found information in a box down the hall in the Hoover building, that ain't nobody looked in 6, 8 months. So you find something which they have said they have done, but there are the powers that be beyond the government in that dark area of stuff they call the swamp. Someone has more or less gotten to both of them. And you say, well, Dave, how can you say that? My name, hey, Travis, go back to sleep. Love you, buddy. Be safe. Thank you. So you say, well, Hawkeye, how do you know that, uh, that somehow they've been threatened? Because in several of Dan's podcasts over the years that I've watched, he has stated that, he's not afraid of anything, but, he will protect his family at any cost. He will protect his wife and his daughter, whom he spoke about many times on his podcast. You can go back and listen, he's very protective of family. And so is Cash Patel. Now, I've not heard him speak about it as directly as I've heard, Dan on his podcast. So you say, well, Hawkeye, so what, so what? No, you don't understand. I feel like both of them, someone showed up with an envelope. And in that envelope, I could just see Dan looking up, going, what's this? And he opens up the envelope and pulls it open. And there is a candid picture of his daughter. Then whatever, not necessarily lewd or anything, but a picture of his daughter, like coming out of the school or going into a fast food or something. So as good as it is, and also a picture of his wife and maybe some of the staff members at the radio station podcast place down in Florida, where he, that the job that he left, right? So somebody dropped that envelope and there was a note inside that just said, quit while you're ahead. And they both got a similar envelope with pictures. Quit while you're ahead. Now, how do I know this? It is speculation purely on my part. But the look on both of their faces, especially Dan's, I'm sitting here looking at it on the TV over there, and he's got the look of terror in his eyes, in my humble opinion. That on his podcast, he would lean in, he'd look, and, you could tell that, he was being forceful, with what he was trying to project. And at other times, when he was being peaceable, you could tell with his facial expressions and his, the look in his eyes on his podcast now, that, you could see the change in what he meant. Well, looking at this picture with his eyes wide open like this, like that ain't freaking normal. Not for him, not in the podcast that I've watched over however many years I've watched. I'm not the longest listener person, but it's been at least within the last year, at least. I lose track of time. But so what about Cash Patel? Well, him the same way. When she asked the question and his eyes started darting around the room and like looking over here and this and that. And his eyes was really big, you know, and like Dan's and Dan's posture was don't move. And, you know, now you say, well, Hawkeye, how do you know that this is what happened? Because both of them, and that's why everybody is so upset that they have flipped in their answers. What would make either one of those gentlemen, or both, switch from the rhetoric that they had 6 months ago, or 5 months ago, or 4 months ago, even, to yep, he did it himself. Yep, that's all there is to it. Yep, I saw the folder. Yep, that's it. And it just be, but it's the eyes that say everything, right? It's the look in Dan's eyes, and the size of how he has his eyes open wide. Now, folks will say, "Well, Dave, you're no expert in body language and reading people," and it's like, but I can just look at the surprise on his face, like, I'm going to tell you this because I've been told to, and because I don't want to, I don't want my daughter to end up in a ditch somewhere in the swamps in Florida, where they live. And like, oh, no, 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 no. But looking at his picture up there on the TV right now, it's this guy. He has to relate this story. And you say, well, I thought that, Dan and Cash were these two upstanding, uprighteous men and so forth, and they're strong as hell. But when somebody shows you a picture of one of your family members and they tell you to hush up, what are you going to do? You're going to, well, I'm going to protect my family. I'm going to, I got Secret Service and but there's somebody that's sitting 2 blocks away as a sniper and could take out a family member in no time flat. They know better that in this day and age, that as much protection as they might provide for their family, if somebody took a compromising picture, then that also means that they could get shot or hurt or injured or whatever from that same vantage point that the picture was taken. You understand? So, well, Dave, how can you make such statements? I'm looking at the picture. I'm looking at what everybody else has said up to this point about Dan has he's changed. He's said all these things in his podcast, and he's been this righteous person for truth and justice. And what the hell happened? Just stop and think about it. Before you pick on the guy and pick on him, and Cash too, one thing, they've been at the job for less than a couple of months, right? Only a couple of months. Whatever they're working on, you got to give them a break. Everybody wants everything done all at once at the same time. Well, in the meantime, they're picking up, child molesters, and they're picking up drug dealers. They're sealing up the border. They're taking care of, all these other things. They're, going to congressional hearings, and so they're working, right? And you take the amount of stuff that they have to go through in 2 months' time. Oh, stop it. That's one thing. But now the fact that they said what they said about who as quickly as they said it, as I'm looking at his picture and how he looks, I'm like, he, Dan, and they, meaning with Cash, they've been warned. And as much as, and here's the reason we can assume that my summation of this is true, is because they were so adamant before they took these positions that they were going to, and Cash was in doing the J6 stuff, and so he's been right in the mix of it. But whoever got into the and took care of you know who. Lights off, people asleep, nobody in his cell, that kind of thing. Having been in jail for a year and having seen how things go, okay, have I been in that jail? No. Have I been in a jail, with maximum security and so forth and people in it? Yep. All the doors sliding and lock, 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 lock. Yep. So the only way that anything like that could happen is when it's allowed. Okay. Now, I've got to say that there are deals made that, somebody says, well, he wasn't going to do it because he was going to get let out. Yeah, well, it might have been that, you take care of yourself or we're going to do it for you. But there's also the lividity thing, the amount of blood that had pooled in his back, not in his butt or his legs. There are some severe questions as to the autopsy and things like that. So, but I do believe that both of these men have been told, here's a picture of your daughter, here's a picture of your son, here's a picture of your wife, and, next time it might not be so good, you know. And the thing is they might not get shot, but they could get a, rare form of cancer quick, you know. Um, they can get hit with a heart attack pin. They can be targeted with electronic equipment, you know. There's all, there are so many things. But so each of those men are brave. I have no doubt. Because they have spoken up and spoke the truth as much as possible. But the fact that they want 180 degrees out of whack on this particular subject, and the look that I'm looking at on the picture, there of him, his reaction, they have been invaded by the, the creature from the Black Lagoon. The creature of the Black Lagoon has showed up on the sun porch. Now, if you've ever watched the creature of the Black Lagoon, that was all up and down the Florida coast, and it would go up and creep into the backyards, and somebody saw it on the back porch of somebody's yet anyway. So, but the idea that the creature of the Black Lagoon lurks all the time, and since Bongino's house is in Florida down there, it would be real easy for me to draw the association of the creature from the Black Lagoon, coming up in the backyard, without anybody knowing. And the next thing you know, you've been absconded or something by the creature, right? So, but anyway, obscure way to put it. But so I do believe that both of them, Dan and Cash both, have been told that we will sick the creature of the Black Lagoon on this particular family member, but if you don't shut up, you have got to follow and say this. And I bet you they both looked at each other and said, you want us to what? Everybody's going to know we're telling a lie. And the powers that be that were standing behind him with dangling the pictures of their loved ones are going, you're going to say he did it. But we're looking at the portfolio. We see the evidence. He can't have done it. Yeah, but you're going to say he did. See these pictures of your loved ones? But, and Cash looked at Dan, and Dan looked at Cash. Shannon, how you doing? Blessings and prayers to you. Hope you're doing well. So, but in, and scanning across into the news and YouTube channels and stuff, and people having this discussion. And as soon as I saw it, I was shocked. And I bet you my eyes looked like his do in that picture right there. And who else is there? Oh, Ganja, what's up? How are you? Cheese and blessings to you too. I know it says cheers, but cheese. My first impression was cheese. I'm going to have my eyes operated on June the 4th, the right one at least, and then later on in the month I'm going to have my other eye done. So I should be able to see better because everything is getting pretty damn cloudy. But anyway, so um, yeah, so watching, looking at their facial expressions and looking at their eyes, that's one part of it, right? The fact that they turned 180 degrees from what they were discussing. We're going to tell you the truth. We're going to open up everything, and we're going to, and so, but they have got somebody with a higher pay grade than either or both of them. And that pay grade has nothing to do with the government. Betcha. But it was a man in a man it was a man in brown. It wasn't necessarily a man in black, but it was a man in brown that showed up with the envelope, you know. And you can look at them when they're sitting beside each other, and both of them, their eyes are this big. So, but you say, well, okay, Dan and Cash have betrayed us. Stop and think about it. Just don't get your panties in the wad. Why would, first of all, what would be their motivation? Why would they change their mind so abruptly? Why would they give such an answer that for all of us watching, we didn't believe them? Tucker Carlson and Sean Ryan and and all these other people. Nah, did you believe him? No. You know. Yeah, that was so. But here's the deal. So here are these two upstanding men that everybody feels that they're both honorable men. Why would these guys trade in their honor? Paying attention. Why would they trade in their honor to say such a thing? What would motivate them and for them to do that, something like that? So for the last several days, I've been thinking, pondering on it. And the biggest thing is just allowing myself to not think about it. It's like I put the question out there to the universe, and it came back almost immediately. I don't need no stinking AI. I just use the cosmic, you know, um, quantum field. But in asking it and thinking about what he said in the past, what I heard him say in his podcast, and then watching what he said the other night, and then watching his face, etc., I was like, somebody has threatened him. Somebody has threatened a family member. Holy shit. That's when I still got a freeze frame up on the TV of, crazy eyes. Why did he react like this? Is the caption on this YouTube. And so it's like, think about it. Why did he act like that? Because somebody higher up that has no official capacity, but is part of that, the creature of the Black Lagoon, they're, they're, it's like they're and I don't mean this bad about the Chinese, okay, but I'm thinking about Godzilla movies, all right? It's a little Chinese or Japanese men sitting in a little shack and they got little controls and they're looking on a little TV monitor that's from the 1950s and they're watching the monster, and they're controlling the monster. And if they don't say this, the monster's going to go and do that. But, so, okay, Dave. So I've got this monster thought in my head. And all I can think of is looking at his picture is they have told him, Dan, and Cass, we're going to sick the monster on your kin. You're not going to know when it's coming. You're not going to go know how they're going to do it. Whether it's a blow dart with a thing in the neck, or you're not going to know. Blow a tire and they go off into the swamp down there in Florida. I'm thinking about his wife and daughter. I don't know if they're living down there, but that's where their house is, right? Down where the studio is in Florida. I don't know where it is. That's what he said. It's in Florida. It's down there. So, but and having lived in Florida, and I have toured down there when I grew up with the carnival, and we traveled all over Florida. So I'm aware of the area, but I haven't been down there in 30 years, but or more. But so for something to come out of the swamp and have somebody just disappear, depending on how much, you know, um, bodyguards they've got, somebody, ninja could slip in and do some damage. And especially Cash Patel, I think he has younger children. So I mean, it's like, so, but to have they have been warned. They weren't bought off. Okay, somebody didn't hand them an envelope full of money. Some people say, "Oh, they were bought off by the big guys." No, they weren't bought off. Not the look on their faces. If anything, we should pray for these two guys. We should pray real hard because somebody got to them. Just like in the movies, but I'm still looking at Dan's face on this, and he's scared. But he's not, like he said in his podcast, I'm not scared for me. I can take it. But if something, put my family in danger. Now he's said it multiple times over the years. Well, at least over the last year. I can't say years because I can't I don't know if I have been listening to him for more than a year. It seems like years. But anyway, so, but what would make him look like that? What would make him react like that? What would create such a thing? He went, I'm going to go be deputy director of the FBI. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to check up on them. I've been talking about them for years. I already know some stuff. And, like the pipe bomb thing for January 6th, but they're supposed to be coming out with information on that. But you see, that's in a different vein. Somebody else is in charge of that higher up. But the Jeffrey thing, yeah, there were other swamp people that were over that department, you see. And so they may try to get the same kind of results, but they're not working, they don't have the same boss man, you know. The pipe bomb thing was a different division. The island stuff, that's a whole different jurisdiction of folks behind the scenes. You understand? So, like different family members, the Smith family is taking care of that, and the Jones family is taking care of this. So you have to think like that. But because that back in the dark reaches of stuff, that's what's going on. So, but anyway, But these men have been threatened, to me, obviously. But did they threaten the individual men? Or just like in the movies, I think it's obvious, especially with Dan. It I can't vouch for Cash Patel because I've not had the opportunity to observe him like I have had the opportunity watching Dan during his podcast. So I've had a greater time to observe Dan. That's why I'm saying I'm making the statements that I am because of my observations and his facial expressions and how, his body, the whole thing. And it's like, so what would make him change his mind? What would make him act the way he acted in that video? What would make him and Cash look like two stooges, when she asked the question and how rigid he was and sitting there? It was like his posture was like, what the fudge? It was he was sitting there kind of stiff anyway, but it was to me visibly he tightened up. So what would make him do that? Watch his podcast if you want to. If you can find the reference to when he says, I'm fine. I could stand up when I was a policeman, and Secret Service and everything. I can defend myself, but my family, my children, and I've not heard Cash say that, but I'm sure he feels the same way. So I don't have it's 31 minutes, 32 minutes. I didn't necessarily want to make this a long video. And I just wanted to sort of get it out there. But there's some folks who are putting some hate on these two men. And I think them folks who are throwing the hate on them, if they'd listened to Dan Bongino at all, they should know. And look at that picture again. Alexander, how you doing? I do think the information going to come out. When they have everything, I feel they have found out is bigger than they thought. Yeah, I agree with that too. But here's the other thing. Um, you know, everybody's got to know, but they've only been in the job for 2 months. That's a lot of detail, a lot of data, um, a lot of people that they have to worm their way through. They don't know who's on their side or not. They don't know who's trying to sabotage what they're doing or not. Both of them walked into a severely, God, talk about a wolf's den. They got wolves in there with rattlesnakes, hissing and hiding under the table and chairs and stuff. And so these two men walked into a shown up horrible habitat to take over something that is still messed up. So they're trying their best. They've got to weed out the bad ones, good ones. And so, there's an agent that comes up and says, Mr. Bongino, Dan, if I may, um, you know, Agent Umpty Scrunch over there, he's been selling secrets, you know. Well, how do you know? Well, I've been here for the last 10 years and he's only been here about 5 and he bought a new vehicle and he's been supporting a new diamond ring and, and, well, the only way that he could afford that if he's doing something, selling secrets. Oh, you should keep an eye on him, right? So then Umpty Scrunch comes over and says, Mr. Bongino, Dan, if I may, that guy that was just talking to you, man, I've been collecting some stuff on him, and I think he's selling secrets to the enemy. So, you know, so you got 2 co-workers, and you're not going to know who's telling you the truth, having worked in excuse me, having worked in a large corporation as a an engineer, temporary engineer, I was in all the departments, and I'd go from Ford department to the other Ford department, and these guys over here, the two or three engineers, hated the guys in this department. So this guy's in Ford A, which was like Ford America, and the guys over here is Ford B, which is Ford North Europe. It's like so the guys at Ford of Europe had different qualifications than the guys in North America. So, but they would hold up things. Well, we need some tooling, and they go, hey, send it over. We need it too, and they'd hold it up so that these guys wouldn't get ahead of these. It was horrible. So what happened in the end was that the it was the company that was suffering because the two engineering factions for Ford were arguing with each other. So, but so in something as big as the FBI, with factions, people that, well, I believe in Comey, oh, Comey, by the way, I had no idea how freakishly tall this guy is. When I saw him, up against Trump and everything, I was like, that some bitch is an alien. He looked around everybody else. He walked in, whatever clip it was, he walked in. He's like this much taller than everybody in the room. And I was like, that guy's an alien. I always thought he looked a little goofy, but God almighty, he's so tall, he looks like an alien. But anyway, so, but back to Cash and to Dan. So please tell your friends, don't pick on them. You should feel sorry for both of these men. I do think, Alexander, that there are things coming out. The thing about the pipe bomb, January 6th, it's a thingy-majig, right? Dan had so much information on that already. Now, that was pertinent on the boots on the ground kind of thing. A gumshoe could follow up on that. And I don't mean that rudely, but, the other thing requires a lot more technical data. And also, how do you get into a prison? There's a lot of, you don't really have any proof, but you do, but you don't. And some of the stuff you got is supposition, and basically all you got's a dead body, and it's already been cremated, and and all these other things, right? So you basically have pictures and um, people's, well, this is what I saw, you know, what's that word? Anyway, so but these two guys you should pity, honestly. Rethink the way you feel about, Dan being a traitor or Cash Patel. Oh, well, we can't trust them either. And, they said that they were going to, do this for us, and they were going to be honest and show everything. And, do you believe them? Like Tucker Carlson and Sean Ryan. No. Do you believe them? No. Does anybody that I've watched so far up to this point believe those two guys? Now, there you go. That should be the big clue right there. Why would both of these guys flip over? Flip from we're going to get to the bottom of it to, he did it. What? Yep, he did. What? Come on. None of us, and sometimes there is no there. But now what does that mean? There is no there. I think Dan is the one who said it. The president of Argentina released classified documents about Hitler living in Argentina till his death. Yeah, how about that? How about that? You know, we hold these truths that all men are created equal and that they are endowed with unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. But man, there ain't nothing in there about having to wade through a bunch of lies from just people, you know. Um, that's probably goes all the way back to George Washington time. It's like, hey, it's Christmas Eve, oh, Washington's gonna, he's got a bunch of men. They're gonna cross over the river and sneak up on you guys. And the guys on the other side were like, nah, bullshit, No, really, man, they're gonna come get you. The men are freezing to death. They got frostbite, but they're gonna cross the river and get you guys at Valley Forge. Now they ain't. Now they ain't. That's bad information. They wake up the next day with gunfire and bayonets, and the rest is history, as they say. But so somebody, folks have been selling information back and forth, and 6 minutes to 20. Oh yeah, hey brother, how you doing? I I'm kind of sort of ready. Um, yeah, I'm ready. In fact, I might start a little early. It's been 41 minutes. I didn't think I was going to be able to yap this long on this subject. But, watching the facial expressions and having had to defend my family, not like these guys do, but, having been caught with drugs, a helicopter over my house with guns pointed at me, I kind of know how what he looks like feels like. If that it's like what just looking at his face, I'm transferring the look on his face to me, and I'm going, holy shit, what the hell? And Cash, he was so jumpy and looking all over and skittish, and I was like, what the hell's wrong with him? Now there are a lot of other people that have been, giving their 10 cents worth on what the eyes mean and this and that. I'm just saying he looks scared. Okay. He looks terrified in a way. I have to tell it's like I have to tell this lie to protect my family. I'm going to say this, and it's so dishonorable. And the look in his eye is nobody's going to believe me, but I have to say this. And he's scared because he had in his what he said, he has betrayed all of his listeners and fans and all that kind of stuff, constituents, right? And Cash Patel, I don't know as much about him, but it's the same kind of thing going on with him, right? But I was really, it hurt me to watch Cash Patel with his eyes going all over, and he was discussing and and I was like, what? So anybody with a little bit of something looked at that and said something's wrong. Maybe he and his family was. Yes, absolutely. As I was saying, in several of Dan's podcasts over the last year at least, he has said, uh, but nobody believing them, so they got to, so they're not going to get far. Yeah, but there is somebody in the swamp that has been there a long time, who's been way back in the back, doing stuff. And there was somebody sitting up there. You will take this envelope and you will take these pictures in this envelope and you will deliver it to Mr. Bongino with the following message. He did it himself. Period. And the man in brown said, "Yes, sir," and uh, and put the pictures and a little note on the inside of the envelope and took it to Mr. Bongino and said, "Here." Much like they say that when Jimmy Carter took over as president, after the inauguration and everything, they took him into the, inside the Oval Office and everything, and a couple of guys closed the doors and said, "Okay, Jimmy, sit down." And he was like, "What?" And they gave him the riot act. They told him, "Listen here, buddy." And from day one, they told him he would be a dead man if he didn't play along, and that he would be like John Kennedy and RFK, So, but there was in memoirs and stuff that, folks said, yeah, they gave, Jimmy Carter within 4 hours of his inauguration a sit down speech by somebody. And so the folks that ain't playing along right, like Joe Biden didn't get that. He didn't get that sit down discussion, right? So, but somebody new to the job, like Jimmy Carter or something, they put him in, sat him down, and said, "Don't think so." So, but anyway, it's about 20. Yeah, it's about 20. So here it is, 4 o'clock, 4:20 in the morning. Oh, well, that's interesting. 4:20 in the morning. Happy 420, y'all. And watching these folks and everybody just, people are waking up finally. Great, what? Great awakening. Oh, yeah. And, many of us have been, I've been doing this for 10 years now. And so, been talking about all kinds of stuff, and weird things. And if you look back over my record of things that I talked about, I was right about a bunch of stuff. And I agreed with folks who were right about a bunch of stuff that we're all finding out now. And one of the things that bothered me years ago was, and it was discussed with some folks that aren't on YouTube anymore, I haven't been able to find. But so with this great awakening, we see the truth coming out, right? But what about these normies that they were like, well, that's not true. No, they sold out. Bongino and Cash, they sold out to the man. No, they didn't sell out. They were told if somebody in their family was going to be dead, they didn't sell out. That's that right there. His face, what I'm looking at is, I'm protecting my family. He's giving a look right now. I got it on my TV screen. A picture from the body language guy, and the caption is, "Why did he react like this?" Now I haven't watched the whole video because it hurt to watch it, and because I saw something else in their eyes. I really have subscribed to this guy, and I appreciate what he does, and so I'm not saying that he is giving a wrong impression. I couldn't go through it all because watching Dan's face and Cash, I was like, oh God, there's, oh shit, somebody you know, has, threatened them. They're holding a knife to his daughter's neck, and going, "Go ahead, talk about this shit. Go ahead." And so There are times when psychically, I've always been, I've unfortunately, but pick up what somebody's feeling and transfer it. And I'm like, holy crap, I know what that feels like, kind of thing. And so looking at that picture of Dan, I'm like, his look of horror and, and I got to say the right thing. And he's checking all the lists in his head. And, wow, gee, I absolutely do believe that he and Cash have been threatened with their families. Um, so, but going back to, the waking up thing, um, yeah, happy 422. Right with you, Ganja. I'll do another one. But I keep thinking back. I can't tell you which one, but I keep thinking back to one of his Dan's podcasts where he said, you know, I can take care of myself. When I was working as a policeman in the Secret Service, and I could protect the president, and but with a family, now I got to think twice about what I'm going to do because my family comes first. Protecting my family comes first. So him and Cash are sticking their neck out longer than a giraffe, right? And they're like, we're going to tell you the truth. And then somebody comes along and says, here's a picture of your daughter, coming out of the school. We could have took her out right then. What? So it's like somebody, oh, Dan Bongino's daughter was, struck and killed today. Would anybody think twice about that? Hell yeah. But how many people would care? Think about that. Well, such and such, President Trump sent out that, the Clinton hit list. Listen, I lived through the Clinton years when he was coming out. I remember being in Arkansas when he was governor, all them years ago. That's how old I am, right? But so we know about hit lists. We know about people who have disappeared. They did it. People disappeared who were on Dealey Plaza. The day the Kennedy got shot. A lot of those people were offed over the years. And so it's like the whole FBI and CIA. Yeah. Well, and like I just said, they're in there to do it, but these guys walked into a hornet's nest. And while they're in there, they got to pick out the nice bees, the nice hornet. Hey, well, no, we're gonna sting your ass. Turn around, bitch. So but anyway, so I want to convey again to the universe. These guys need our prayers. I really do believe it. There's no other way for them to tell us what's going on. If you pay attention, it's like these guys are prisoners in a prisoner of war camp, okay? And they're standing there going, no, he did it, man. He crossed the line, man. He crossed the line, man. You know what I mean, man? He crossed the line. He did it, man. He did it, man. And everybody's going, he's just a traitor. Okay, Patel's like going, well, he did it, man. Was having trouble looking at the camera. Then that's an answer right there. He didn't do it. And somebody's telling me to give you this lie. And you all, I'm thinking from Dan's point of view, Dan's sitting there going, y'all know how I feel about this because what I've said in my podcast before. And then he blurts out, he did it. What? It was like we all got shot by the same gun, right? At the same time. So do you believe him? Everybody says no. No. I'm watching Sean Ryan and Tucker Carlson. Tucker was a little chuckled. His, you know, they weren't trying to berate the guy, but Sean Ryan was being really, picky. And well, I haven't known him long, and they're both honorable men. Well, dumbass, think about why would they give up their honor? If you see that they're both honorable men, why do you think they would give up that honor to tell a bold-faced lie because they didn't believe it before, and you think they believe it now after only been there 2 months, and you think that they, no. But the answer also came in. We have stuff coming out here shortly on the pipe bomber and on some other stuff. That so what they're doing is they're going to show us all, my humble opinion, they're going to show us all the real stuff they got. Here is concrete evidence on this and this. We have pictures of this and this. And the swamp creature doesn't care about that. Okay. The big, ugly, nasty swamp creatures looking out from his little hut in the weeds, and he goes, yeah, let him go. So they're getting away with this, no problem. But the other thing, because it involves so many other people and so many other factions and groups and stuff, nah. Swamp creature says, what? What'd you say about, J.E.? Old Jeffy boy? What? What'd you say? That old dragon lifts his head. But anyway, if you hear somebody just picking on these two unmercifully, if you can and you think it's appropriate, interject that these guys are probably under duress. These guys have been threatened, period. You can see it in their eyes. You can see it in their motions. I'm going to watch the rest of this video eventually to see what this gentleman has to say. He's got some very interesting points about, body motion and hands and facial expressions. He's really good. And I'll say it again. It's the body language guy. And this video is why did he body language analysis of Dan Bongino avoiding Trump's assassination attempt. So that's the other part of the swamp creature. How come they can't talk about that? Because they literally washed it off, his blood off the top of the roof within hours of the incident, cremated his body and destroyed all the evidence. And why do you think he would react that way? Because he got pictures and they're going to go, you saw that guy that was on the roof? Yeah. We'll take care of your daughter just like that. There'll be a bullet to the head and we'll wash her blood off the pavement. Go ahead. You brave son of a bitch. Go. You think you're so tough? Go ahead and see. And that's where Dan has always drawn the line. He has said it himself. That, I will protect my family first. Now, I think he's in such a position. I think him and Cash sat down and said, listen, we might be able to get to the swamp monster eventually. And in 3 or 4 years, we might be able to make enough changes within the FBI that we might actually get to the swamp creature and use an RPG to take him out. Figuratively speaking, mind you. I'm still thinking of the swamp creature in the movie, So but back then I think they used depth charges. But that maybe in 2 or 3 years that they can find out who are the good guys within the bureau and who are the bad guys, and through their continuous weeding of personnel um, and going through information and doing things on the sly over here, to just is like, well, I'm collecting information, and one of these days I'm going to be able to present it, much like Jake Tapper's doing now. It's like, you should have known about Biden. Why didn't you? Then he writes a book about, oh, how bad it was. It's like, you some bit. But to that point, though, um, I think Dan and Cass have, this is my supposition, they sat down and maybe to a stiff drink and said, listen, we still want to correct things. Dan might have said, listen, I don't want to quit, but I do not want my family to be harmed. And Cass is like, no, me neither. What are we going to do, Dan? And they sat there, took a drink, and said, we got this thing coming up. Look how much fentanyl we got out of the deal, and look how many, we're still on the, on the edge of finding children and putting pedophiles away, and you know, so we have to shut up about this. They told us that we can't talk about this. Now, I still believe that there's going to be evidence that comes out. But one of the things that's been an issue with that stuff coming out has been, well, you have people to testify that, that they were trafficked. And then you say, but trafficked to where? Who trafficked you? Well, he was on that, that bump of land out there. Yeah, but where'd you go? Don't know. Do you know where the transaction was? No. Who said you were trafficked? But I'm saying that guy who's, who did it himself, took a plane ride and ended up, in some other country, and working for the man every night and day, because they left a good job in the city. Anyway, so, but they're saying that even though the evidence might show that he was doing something wrong, an illegitimate thing, if they can't find from whom they were delivered, to whom they were delivered, and then everything else is just supposition. Well, we saw you with that little child. Yeah, but then what? Don't know. Child disappeared. Don't know. Where'd he go? Don't know. Is there any evidence? No. Was he trafficked? Probably. Where'd he come from? Don't know. Where did the child go? Don't know. Oh, by the way, I'm dead. And that's my defense. Read it and weep. But so the folks that are looking at it, regardless of the information, that there might not be a prosecution because of certain jurisdictions, but the fact that they're talking about a group of people who were wronged, who were trafficked, but they don't know exactly who they were and where they went and how they got there and what the so it's like, so you got pictures of them sitting by the pool. Doesn't mean a damn thing. But the kids were there. Okay. And he was sitting with them. Okay. And it shows that this guy he liked to be around little kids. Okay. Like Joe sniffing hair, right? So, but it doesn't prove that they were trafficked or that they were molested, or there's no proof in simply having a picture. Now, to Dan and Cass's current situation, they were given pictures in Dan's I can see where they were. I've not, I don't think I've seen a picture of his daughter. Okay. So I don't know. But just in hearing him talk about her. So he took his daughter to a concert. They had a lot of fun and great, you know. So they came up to him and said, "Here's a picture of your daughter. She's going to go to this concert and she's going to have a lot of fun, but she ain't coming home." What? Go ahead, try to stop us. What? Go ahead, tell your daughter to stay home and see what happens. What? Are you going to protect your daughter, or are you just going to go, screw you? I'm going to go ahead and say he didn't do it. No, he didn't do it. No, he something else. No, whoops, my daughter's dead, or my wife, or both of them killed in a car accident. But there's been too many people that a day or two just before they testify, there's a car accident and they're dead, you know? So Dan knows, and Cash knows all too well what a mafioso type hit system has been out there for a long time. And is it CIA? No, I don't think so. I think it is a mob type organization that has people in every single place. Or because they're this mob organization that's going on behind the scenes of the entire government, they can walk in and they've got the old fedora, right? They walk in and they've got their hats on, and everybody turns and looks, and they know that those are the Italian gang. And the guy walks in and goes, "Yo, man, what's going on here, man?" So everybody knows. Who do them two guys work for? Don't know. We know that we don't want to mess with them. And we know that that's part of the group, you know, that government mafioso that's working behind the scenes in every single department. And those are the guys that are going to get you. Is it the CIA? Well, they probably got a guy or two in the CIA. And so somebody in the CIA does the deed, whatever it is. And everybody goes, "See, it's the CIA." And then somebody in the CIA gets whacked or something. And they go, "Man, it must have been the FBI or the NSA or. But it's just the mafia within it. It's the government mafia. Um, and so and whoever the Godfather is, I don't think it's Obama, and I don't think I think we would be surprised to find out who the Godfather is of the mafia government. I think we'd all go, "What? Him or her? They're in charge." Seriously, And then on the other hand, we might go, "Oh, it's them." Mm-hmm. But we have to agree. Now, everybody, whoever might watch this, you might not agree with me, but there are those hands behind everything that goes on. So I want you to consider and give Cash and Dan a break. Pray for them and their loved ones that nothing will happen to them. Pray that these two men, they are strong. They have proved it. Dan left the shelter of his home in South Florida to join up to try to fix the FBI. And they have threatened him. They have threatened Cash Patel. It ought to be obvious. Give them a break. I'm going to repeat myself one more time. Why would they flip the way they did? Why would they look the way they did and be so adamant? Adamant. He did it himself. Really? Really? And how come you don't want to talk about the president's attempted assassination. Well, uh, evidence is, but to their point, the evidence is gone. They don't have any evidence on the guy on the roof. They don't. Everything was destroyed before they ever got there. Now they could reopen some investigations, and not that it isn't important, but they got some stuff where they've got more information, more pertinent information. It's information that is live, if you will. It's still moving. There are parts and things, and whereas the other one sort of got a dead end to it. And it's like, so why would we spend a bunch of time over here? Guy on the roof, cremated, blood's gone, no evidence. What do we do? And the evidence we thought we had has been destroyed by the swamp creature, and now what? So two new guys in the department are going to focus on that? No. They're going to focus on something. Well, we still have information about the pipe bomber on J6, and we're working on the folks at J6, and we know that there were, FBI agents and assets, and we know, so they're working on that because it's alive. There's all these other people involved. Where, no offense, but the attempted assassination is now the guy that got shot and killed in the stands. His family wouldn't necessarily agree with this, and I don't mean to be rude about it, but to the only two people that it would matter would be to President Trump and the shooter, because theoretically, those are the only two people involved. Whereas the bombing thing and all the stuff at the J6 and all the people thrown in jail and all that, there are hundreds of people who are involved in that. That's what makes it alive. So we're going to focus over here on the president's attempted assassination. We ain't forgot. We can't forget. Don't want to forget. But this has got all these other pieces and folks and stuff, and Ashley Bobbitt. They got $5 million for her daughter getting killed. Hey, Chloe. So, but in the meantime, these guys, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, these two guys have the opportunity to work with the current staff and to find out who's loyal and who isn't. They can, they're splitting up Washington and sending their agents out across America. I think that's great. And, Kash Patel almost lied under oath during his Senate confirmation, because he absolutely did say on the Sean Ryan show that he was going to close the FBI building. And he is. So the senators who, you said you was going to do that. Is that what you're really going to do? And he was like, well, theoretically, and blah, blah, blah. And you didn't take, at the time they were beating him up about a particular part of that interview, and he was getting away with it by, you're taking it out of context, which they were. So he got away with answering a yes or no on that because, they were taking it out of context, but he did say he was going to close the FBI building. So, but anyway, and turn it into a museum. But apparently it's so bad and nasty, they just want to tear it down. But anyway, so, but Kash Patel, in his strength and what he said he was going to do with the FBI, the reformation that he's already doing and that they have in motion, do you think for a moment that he would give such an answer as, we've read the file folder and he did it? What? Same thing with Dan. But the look in their eye and how I, it's hard for me to watch it over again, right? Because I see how Cash is, jittery and moving around, and his eyes are darting all over the place. And it's like he's a guy in prison and he's trying to send a message with his eye blinking and looking at different places. Like, look over here, and then down over here, and then look, up over here, and then, he'd look straight ahead for a little bit. But, and Dan Bongino just sitting there with that deer in the headlight look. Um, I could not believe it. And neither does I don't think there's anybody out there who saw it that are like, yeah, he's telling the truth. There's so many people who are beating them both up. You see them guys, they said they was on our side and they're traitors. They're traitors to all of us MAGA people. They're traitors to the truthers, and they're traitors to the. Y'all need to shut up. Y'all need to back up some and give these two guys a breath. They've been there for 2 months. And quite frankly, look at their faces. They have been threatened. Look at them. They've been threatened. They're traitors to the MAGA movement. Dan said he was a truther, and we believed him, and now he lied. Yes, he lied. It was so obvious that he lied, that both of them did. Tucker and Sean Ryan, right? Do you believe him? No. Chuckle, chuckle. That's the answer. What they said is not true. That's the answer. But we're going to give you all this other stuff on the pipe bomb, and we're going to release all this other stuff to you. We're getting ready to roll it out. Okay. So, but you're going to have to trust us on this one. We're lying. This is one of those calculated risks they had to take, but their family's at stake. Dan is not worried about his own personal safety, and I don't think Cash is either. Not that they want to commit suicide, but they do not want their family to be involved in this, and they have been threatened with their family. Here's a picture of your daughter. Here's a picture of your wife going into the grocery store. We could let the air out of her tires. We can. Um, your radio station place down there that you worked so hard to put it could catch fire. Hope your insurance is paid. Your airplane could go down. There's all kinds of messages. And there's been all kinds of people, bumped off through the Clinton Foundation, So, but all these folks out there, I'm sorry, I'm going to say it again, should take what they see and saw. They lied to us. Exactly. What do you mean, Hawkeye? You noticed that they lied, right? Yes, that's the clue. What? That's the clue. I'm pointing at the TV because that's where the picture is. That's the clue. You know that they've lied. You know they've lied. Because if Dan had really read the portfolio of what happened, he would have known that the lividity on the back and the thing in this was out of whack from the whole, I did it myself routine. There are too many questions still left unanswered. So to answer simply, he did it. It's a lie. Everybody knows it. And that's the clue. And I think also that's a warning. Why would Dan say it the way he did? I mean, just a short and he did it, What? Then there was explanation, but he did it, and the flightiness of Cash. Oh, Dave, but you're not an expert. No, but just I have been observing people for a long, long time. you know, doing theater and all these other different things. And it is my job to be a watcher. And but that I just would ask you to, instead of thinking, just turn that switch. If you're thinking that they're traitors, you have to think why. You got to go that next step. Look, they lied. They're traitors. Yeah, but why would they do it? Why would all of a sudden these two men on the same two subjects seem like traitors? Well, they lied. Okay, but why? You got to ask why. Their families were threatened. Both of them had their they were threatened by using their families. We're going to put your daughter on the railroad tracks. You know, uh, in a long, the anyway. I think too much in vaudeville, and old silent movies. Going to tie her to the railroad tracks. If you don't bring me the deed to your ranch, I'll blow you all to bits. And that's a Ray Stevens song. And then along came Jones, slow talking, low walking Jones. Anyway, so yeah, give these two guys a break. Pay attention to what their faces say. Now I know there are going to be a bunch of folks that are just going to, and they're mega folks that feel like they and truthers who feel like they have been betrayed. And these guys are just going to have to take a deep breath and go, wait a minute. For me, I pulled cards the other night, and it said that we got to take a break, and there are messages from the universe that are giving us hints as to what's going on here, but we need to pay attention. And so, what we think something is, and like I pulled the Swan card, which is grace, and in that grace, we have to accept the plan from God, from the Creator. And the next card was Hawk upside down. So it's like, make sure that you know, you may not be observing things in the right way. You might be observing things upside down, right? And so here, is these two gentlemen whose facial expressions and the answers are totally opposite of what we would have expected. We could have gotten an answer that, it's still very suspicious, but we don't have any concrete leads or answers yet. That would have been the appropriate answer, right? It is still under investigation. Just know that it's complicated and the information we have is sketchy and we just got here in our jobs. But the answer was nope, he did it. Period. Nope, he did it. You mean you're not still under investigation? You mean you're not still? Nope. I read the file. He did it. What? And in that file was a picture of his daughter with a note that said, he did it. Okay. Hopefully that's enough. And I know I'm just repeating myself in different ways, and I've got a knack for doing that, but I'm starting to get repetitious even for me. That's hard to do, right? No, but seriously. So please pray for these gentlemen and their families. Please pray for their safety, honestly. Now, pray for all them folks up there, their safety. But at the moment, the director and the assistant director of the FBI, they found some boxes. They've uncovered, here's another clue, they have uncovered some new information about some stuff. Right? They said that in the in the interview. So think about that. The new information is we're going to get your family if you don't shut up. Oh, that's new information. Oh, yeah, we're going to roll this out. Did they really get anything new? No. But they did get a note from the swamp boss. So, in the interview, they gave us all the clues, I believe. So, if you need to go back and watch it over again with fresh eyes, they've been threatened. Let me see if they have left any other clues because I was so mad and pissed off at them for, um, for telling a lie and for them, turning on us truthers that, so, okay, close your eyes and shake the cobwebs clear and look at it from the fact that they have been threatened. Watch it again. Just saying. You might still say, no, they turned on us. Okay. Then you're not really paying attention. And maybe that you haven't watched much of Dan Bongino and his facial expressions when he on his podcast. So I would invite you to go look at some of his older podcasts and watch his reactions and how his posture and things like that. He was stone cold, a statue that the during the interview. He was not relaxed at all, and he's been on TV. He's been interviewed before. He used to be an interviewer, and he was a little more relaxed than he was during that interview. So there's a lot of body language that you, if you just, but if you watched him in his podcast, you can bring that knowledge forward to watching, what they just did and their reactions. So, but give the guys a break. Pray for them. Don't beat up on them, will you? I would assure you that those two guys are doing their damn their dead level best to get stuff out to us and to be honest and truthful and above all, transparent. So anyway, I continue to pray that each and every day that each and every one of you will continue to learn how to accept and receive the knowledge, the healing, the wisdom, and the many blessings from the Creator. And in the meantime, I know I've said it, I'll repeat it again. Don't beat them up, but pray for them, will you? Pray for the protection of their family members. I've I've had a bad feeling about this ever since I saw, Dan Bongino's reaction. And Dan, if you watch this, I love you, brother. I'm not sure what the message means, but I understand what your body language meant. And if I'm totally wrong, okay, still love you. And I'm still praying that each and every day, that each and every one of you will continue to learn how to accept and receive the knowledge, the healing, the wisdom, and the many blessings from the universe. And that we keep praying for each other and with open hearts and open minds too. In that, well, I think he's guilty. I think he's a traitor, but I'll pray for him. Nah, open your heart back up. Because if you open up your heart, you know that he's not, neither one of them are traitors. You'll understand. There is something much bigger. They're warning us, they're telling us, and they're leaving clues. So, and because I believe in the law of three, I continue to pray that each and every day, that each and every one of you will continue to learn how to accept and receive the knowledge, the healing, the wisdom, and the many blessings from the universe. And that's an hour and a half, which is kind of short for me. But I love you, Dan. If you watch this and get this far, be safe, brother. I know you feel safe with yourself, but I'm praying for your family. Okay, and you too, and everybody. But you get what I'm saying. So thank you all who have watched. I appreciate it. I never ask for to subscribe or share it or anything like that. But if you, I will ask if you think I've said anything that made any sense, you might share it with a friend or two that might be having problems with this, just as an observation that they might go, you know, I might not be right, but I do have a point. I do have a point of view that does need to be considered. Okay. And I haven't heard anybody yet saying, well, why would they talk like this? Because they were threatened, dumbass. Don't you see it in their eyes now? There may be somebody else out there who's made that observation. I have not watched everybody, okay? But in watching what I have not seen anybody go, well, well, what made them change their mind so quick? Pay attention, you know. It's a spy movie for crying out loud. So why did it, well, gee, Mr. Beavers, they changed their mind so quick. They said they saw the UFO, but now they say there was no UFO. What happened, Mr. Beavers? Because the county commissioner called up and said, you deputies, you never saw no UFO. So anyway, all right. I'm into that movie thing. I continue to pray that y'all would, send prayers. Dan, cheers, my friend, even though we've not met. Cheers. Uh, I got your back with prayers. That's about the best I can do. So be safe until next time. Love you all and have a great day.